But with a file, you could shape it and it would be just as soft as some of the low carbon steel. But then we could quench it. In other words, we could put it in the fire until it got just bright red hot.
Mm-hmm.
And at a certain point, following the color, then we could take and plunge it in water, or sometimes oil, to cool it instantly. And the carbides, or the carbon within the material, would freeze, and it would be saturated with carbide molecules and be very hard, and it'd make a good, a real good hard edge for a cutting tool.
So if you were to quench it and then you found a mistake, could you heat it back up and work on it some more? Or?
Sure
Okay.
could. And a lot of times I've made tools, carving chisels. I don't think I brought any. I think I did. But if you held it to a grinder too long and it started to change color or it turns a little bit blue, you've softened the material. Well, you can actually heat treat it again and do a, finish the blade up again. It'll be as good as it ever was. Here's a file. And that's fairly sharp.
And you made that?
Mm-hmm. Now if I, yeah, you could actually,
Don't do that.
you could actually shave with it. But for that reason, a blacksmith liked to get a hold of that high carbon steel. It makes some pretty neat tools out of it. Here's a wood carving chisel that I made, and instead of using a file, I used an Allen wrench. And the Allen wrench, they're pretty strong, tough. It had enough carbon in it that I could heat treat it and get a fairly good edge, and made a pretty effective tool. And in fact, that's what I carved little spoons with. And maybe, I don't know if we should leave something really deadly sharp in a show and tell box, but it does represent a little bit of the finesse that a blacksmith can use to make a pretty decent tool.
As long as we keep the show and tell box out of the way, I don't see
Well,
where
if you
it
were
would be a
aware of,
problem.
some of the Sharpies that were in there,
Right.
you wouldn't have to worry about it. I guess I got a couple in there. I made different shapes, and good for carving pumpkins. There's one that's doesn't have the handle yet, but that's,
And you make the handles too, don't you?
yeah.
How do you put the chisel into the handle?
Usually, I make a long, tapered, square shank on it,
Okay.
and then I make a hole in the handle that's just a little bit undersized, and then heat this up and poke it down into the wood, and it kind of burns a pattern in there.
Okay.
And I wouldn't go all the way to the bottom, but I'd burn it to within maybe a ½ inch of where it had to stop, and then I would hammer it in after everything was cool, and it makes a real tight fit.
So you would leave it in there, let it cool, and then hammer it the
I
rest of
wouldn't
the way?
leave it in there.
You would pull it back
I'd
out?
pull it out so it wouldn't actually burn all the wood, that deep.
Okay.
But yeah, I've made several of them that way. So I had different shapes and different sizes. Yeah, I could leave some of that there. And maybe I wouldn't have to have the edge so deadly sharp. We don't want any the kids leaving the blacksmith shop bleeding.
No, we wouldn't. We want them to have all their
That looks
limbs.
bad. But anyway.